Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reflections on Music and Nature. I think any discussion about this topic of nature and music would be incomplete without addressing whale song in some way. And I'm really happy today to be with a group that specifically focuses on um, that phenomenon. So this is Song Sessions, which is a three-person collective that draws directly on the structures and sounds of what whales do. It's part improvisation, part composed music, part activism, and it offers a really unique way of music making that stands out, I think, from what past musicians have done with whale song. The group was awarded a grant from New Music USA and a residency from Ensemble Mise en Place in Bushwick, Brooklyn in 2018. So here we have Barry Sharp, who's a composer and part of the group operating electronics, and Eric Umbel, who is clarinetist, and Isabel Lepanto Gleicher is the flutist, who may be joining us in the middle of this if she can get a connection. But regardless, thank you all so much for doing this. It's really nice to see both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Could you start by offering us maybe like a explanation of what is Song Sessions and what are some of your interests or aims as an ensemble?
Would you like to go, Eric, or shall I?
Go, Barry.
Okay, I'll just go. I think Song Sessions came out of our mutual interest in whale song, of course, but also there's this feeling in this time with climate change everywhere and people not taking care of the environment, and also just the fact that you see all of these documentaries about animals that are so cool. You're just like, oh wow, they're such fascinating creatures. All of these things like come together to me in this piece, from that like one interest in nature, but two, a want to get people to take care of it, get ourselves to take care of it, but also motivate other people to do that. And I think that Song Sessions and speaking to like one type of animal, like one really particularly creative animal, just really inspires people to think beyond themselves, beyond like human creativity, and be like, oh wow, birds are also creative, whales are also creative, spiders do these crazy dances, birds also do these crazy dances, and it's just that that factor of just being like, oh wow, nature is like so great, I should take care of it. I think that's built into the essence of Song Sessions and what kind of drew all of us together.
Yeah, absolutely, Barry. I think on that point, there's an expansiveness to the scale of whales and their size, and also in the way that they think about sound. That's kind of beyond the human attention span in some ways.
Time and whale time are different. Like I think of Bizet, the French composer. He talks about like insect time and human time, and then there's whale time. Yeah.
Whale time, exactly, whale time. And so I think for me as a performer, that's always been attractive, kind of pushing those boundaries of what time and space and the kind of spaces that we create to experience a work, and the walls around that. So to that aim, I think Barry and I were kindred spirits because we share a similar desire to kind of push those boundaries and really experience length in a way and form in a way that is less governed by the push and pull of harmonic forces and more governed by the vertical experience of color and texture and timbre that is more in the moment and a part of a much more extended form that so that I think, if tell me if I'm wrong, Barry, but I think that's at least a part of the connection there too, is being inspired by that in the whales, and really their ability to kind of experience life in a way that we can't even comprehend, and to try and tap into that a little bit here.
And life for them, not just in terms of how they think about time, how they think about sound unfolding in time, but also the atmosphere that they create sound vibrates in a completely different way than ours does.
Yeah.
The scale of how far their sound carries is different. The different types of objects and other things that are in the ocean, noise pollution, for instance, is another factor that is all of these things completely foreign to us. And so they're making music, they're making like these sonic landscapes and songs in a world that we can't be a part of. And maybe we were at some point in the past evolutionary scale.
Right. Well, maybe you could talk a little bit for those of us that might be more ignorant about what are whales doing? Like, why do whales sing, and what are they singing about? I love the idea that it's not, humans don't just have a monopoly on art making. Like you just pointed out, like birds sing and they actually practice and create very aesthetically beautiful songs. Spiders do dances. Bees also are known to dance and communicate in these very elaborate ways. So why do whales sing, and how do their different songs kind of evolve through the oceans? Like, give us maybe a little like crash course on.
So the question of why whales sing, I think, is still being explored. It's hard to determine, again, because of the environmental factor. Because to determine like what whale is singing, you would have to have a team of people that are listening. You have to have divers that can identify the whale, etc. And so scientists think that the reason why they sing is because of sexual selection, that only males sing to attract a female, but the males compete with each other over their songs to do so. And the most innovative one is the one that
it's kind of like birds. That reminds me of birds too, because it's similar. Yeah.
And actually, one of my mentors, Katie Payne, she said one time they sped up a whale song. She was a whale researcher, and they sped up a whale song, and it sounds a lot like bird song structures and stuff. If you just speed it up, the sounds themselves as well.
There's that issue of time. Yeah.
Right. But just sort of as a crash course in whale song, basically you can break down the whole song structure into just a sound unit, one sound unit. For instance, we were to listen to track 1 of Songs of the Humpback Whale. That would be the first sound that you hear. Then there's a second unit, and then another one. They put those together into sort of a phrase, or like a collection of units. Okay, and then they have a whole other set of units, say like completely different, or something like so there's like 3 different sound units that they might play with in like a song phrase, and all of these together sort of make up a theme. And then in a second theme group, they'll have a different collection of sound units that they'll use and put together. And what you'll hear at a certain point is that at the start of the recording, you'll hear a certain set of sounds, move into another set of sounds, and then maybe another set, and then you'll hear very distinctly coming back to the first one where you started again. And that cycle will continue over hours. And the length of that cycle will vary anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes. That's what they found. So that's like one song. A song session is hours and hours on end. And what happens is, and Katie studied this phenomenon over the course of 19 years, the same set of whales. What happens is the songs evolve over the course of time. And you can track, oh, this is a new idea that was introduced, and now they're integrating that into the song. But they reject other ones. They choose which sounds they want to work with, and continue to improvise on them basically over the course of years, and they become completely different over time.
They're particular to different regions, right? Too some whales travel and they might hear another song from a different group and integrate certain aspects of it, or not. Yeah.
And I just read recently this phenomenon happens with some. Was it a sparrow in Canada? And I just heard it's this song started, and I know it's related to whales, but it's this song style started in one part of Canada and then just like carried over all the way into the rest of it. Now all the birds there are like singing this particular like little difference in the song. And it's like amazing to us, but it's also like obvious. Like we're not the only people, you know, humans are not the only things on the earth that are possible of being creative.
Totally. So, you know, a lot of composers and musicians in the past have created music that addresses whale song or is inspired by whale song. Like in the 1970s, there's a big movement about protecting whales. George Crumb is probably the biggest example that comes to mind with Vox Balinese. Takemitsu wrote music about whales, Alan Hovhaness. So I wonder if you could kind of maybe take us through the history of like what musicians have done with whales and whale song, and then maybe talk a little bit about kind of the nuts and bolts of your own interpretation of the music that you make and how it's different, because it sounds a lot, because I was listening to your, you know, the sample you sent me, and it doesn't the sounds are not necessarily like just now you did really amazing impression of the whale songs, like it was perfect. But
thank you.
I mean, I know you're really listening to this stuff, it's very clear, but in the recordings that you sent, I don't think there was necessarily, it's not necessarily about the specific sounds. So I know it's kind of a long question. So
Yeah.
first walk
No,
us
it's a great question. It's a great question.
walk
Absolutely.
us through the history of whale song and then like what you guys do.
Yeah. I can go with what we do, Barry, if you want to do the history.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so should I do the history first,
Yeah,
or
you
would
go
you like
Barry and then
Okay. So do you want like a history of whale song in music specifically?
music.
Okay. So you mentioned, you know, all of the composers there, basically that I'm aware of. I think John Tavener is another one, but like one of the first people that I can remember, I'm a little rusty with this again, so bear with me.
That's okay. It's not a quiz.
One of the first, I remember when I really came across this and became interested in whale song, I instantly went to try and find who are the people who have written music with whale song or have written music inspired by it. And one of the pieces that I came across was Alan Hovhaness.
Is it when God created great whales or something? Is that it?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And when I listened to it, you know, I was like simmering with excitement and stuff. And I think it's a nice piece, but it basically is an orchestra playing with a tape of a whale. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what I found so fascinating about whales was the like structure and the way that they improvise. I enjoy the sounds as well, but the like system, the underlying system, how they create and how they improvise, I thought needed more attention. And so I kept researching. I found like John Tavener has a piece. Gosh, I'm blanking on the name of that too. Let me just look it up.
Well, and the Crumb piece, that's interesting what you say about the Alan Hovhaness, because I had a similar reaction to what you're saying now too, I think, because it's like, it is like what you say. He basically samples literal whale songs with orchestra. And like, cool piece, like it's fun and very exciting, and like nothing wrong with that, but it's a little bit surface level maybe in a way, like it's not addressing the structure as much. And like with George Crumb, it's about like time and timelessness. And
right, and in George Crumb's take, there's still that aspect of mimicry of the whale. Like in the beginning, with the flute solo, like, you know, it's like the sound of the whale is very much there. And the whale becomes like a symbol for this ancient voice, which is a really cool approach, but it's still not what I was looking for. John Tavener's piece, The Whale, it's still sort of that symbolic like meaning of the whale in the piece. And it's been a while since I've listened to it, but feel free to check it out and, you know, let me know.
There was this focus on aesthetics for a long time, and like trying to emulate aesthetic with our modern instruments.
Right.
And at least through our own discussions, you know, the electronics and sounds like sine tones, and the clarinet sounds like a clarinet, and the flute sounds like a flute. And so I think instead of trying to minimize and find solutions for us to sound less like ourselves, we wanted to embrace the fact that we are human beings. This is our creative outlet, and we are inspired by um, this mode of communication and these structures to create music in a way where we can communicate and develop long form pieces by trying to emulate and understand how Wales constructs their forms, and then we use our tools to do that ourselves. Um, and I kind of like that also because it feels like we're connecting more to their thought process and less to how humans perceive their aesthetic, and trying to like um, be really in touch with how we communicate with one another as human beings, and like how we perceive time, and like how that physically feels, and what kind of space we create as well. Um, so it feels in some ways, maybe on the surface, it honors the whale songs less because we're not trying to mimic aesthetics, but on the other side of it, the process feels so real and present to me in a way that other works don't capture in some ways. What do you think,
Right.
Barry?
So it sounds like what you're saying is, I mean, you're not necessarily literally imitating the actual sounds that whales are making, but it's more about drawing from their own structure of singing and improvisation.
Yeah,
Right.
that's exactly right.
Okay. Cool. And so the music that you perform, are those, like, how much of those are improvised and how much of those are pre-composed? Like Barry just, before he was talking about the way that whales have this like cyclic type of thing where they'll come back to certain themes or certain musical gestures. But is that is that kind of related? Maybe explain like how much of it is composed and how much of it is just improv.
I think, I mean, the performance that I sent you is completely improvised. Like you could classify it as just as maybe a form of free improvisation. But what we are doing is thinking about beforehand, like how, like with the score, it's like how do I like bring the material into something very like just coming up with, like, for instance, a couple of different sounds and then moving from there. One of those cyclical like anchoring sounds is just simply a long tone. And so every time we come back to a long tone in the piece, it feels like this like moment of rest and return, and just we're at the beginning again. Those like long sounds might change. They might not be the same, but I think it's kind of a signal to the audience like, oh, okay, we're coming back to like the very beginning of this. Um, but it's also just kind of working on winnowing down our material and just working with and extending outwards, like you were talking about with scale, extending outwards as long as we can.
Yeah.
What we're working with and time itself as well.
Yeah, while the exact content isn't composed, we are doing our best to be as intentional as possible to be true to the process. So, especially Isabel and I, um, our pitch content is limited to 3 or 2 pitches at the beginning of each cycle, and we'll add up to 5 or 6. Maybe sometimes we get crazy and like feel inspired and go a little bit further than that, but it's a very intentional choice, and then we return. Um, and in each cycle in the performance, the harmonic kind of context changes. We choose different pitch classes for each of those, and so yeah, I mean, I think the idea of improvisation is interesting because while we are creating content, it is like very much within an intentional form that we've discussed, and we're able to communicate in a way like um, understanding when someone's moving on to their next idea and when they're coming back to their first one, and being able to sense that is important. And then, of course, Barry is able to kind of create an even longer form with the sine tones that kind of layers on top even the cycles that happen within the piece. there was I think maybe 2/3 of the way through of the piece, there was this moment where the sine tones kind of overtook the performers, and those are beautiful moments. But that form is even like a longer, it ties it all together in some ways, and it's very important for Isabel and I, since we're single line instruments, to have that kind of resonance to play against, and I think it kind of is very imperative that we have that. Is that helpful?
Absolutely, yeah. I think it made me realize too, like, you know, like we're talking about animals doing different art forms, right? And you know, this process that that whales go through, which is a cyclic process that can, like you said, last from 5 minutes, 30 minutes, and it, you know, session will go for hours. It helps us think about time differently too. Like, you know, we as humans, you know, across different cultures, humans have different perceptions of time, right? You know, from Western culture versus Eastern philosophy versus other cultures have all these different ways that they think of time, and it's not necessarily universal. And then whales, you know, this must reflect some way that they think of time too, I would imagine. And so you're kind of drawing on that. Yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they have a whole season in which they spend singing to just continue singing. They can just enjoy making the sounds for as long as they want to.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of mind-blowing, you know, whereas we don't necessarily get to do that, or don't allow ourselves to do that because of extra societal structure.
So true, Barry. That's something that makes me excited about the piece. Like, we can do a performance where it's an hour. We can do a performance where it's 30 minutes. But someday, when we're able to kind of be together again, I would love to do an installation where we're there all day or even all night. You know, people can come in and out. I've always wanted to just feel how that feels as a performer too, to have to deal with the physical limitations there, and struggle, you know, and what the result is when you're faced with those limitations, and how you act creatively when your face is tired and you know, you're thirsty or whatever. It's like, what kind of music comes out of that? And just also for me, I think it takes a long time for my brain to turn off, right? So to be in a performance that's that long and I lose track of time, I would love that. I mean, that's just like, that's what I want, you know? Like, take me away from the place, right?
Outdoors too.
Yeah.
Maybe one of these days you guys all get together and do like in a park or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. Barry, art installation in Prospect Park. We have to do it.
I'm down for whatever, you know. There's this like wonderful flexibility, it feels like, with the project, where like, you know, we want to go to like really not conventional spaces and do this, and like try to get to people as well who don't normally go to a concert, you know, to just be invited and feel like welcome to this. And as some people have described it to me, like, just have like be like, what? I don't even know what I was listening to, but I loved it. Like, as in, like, I've never heard anything like that before, but I really enjoyed it. And it was great to learn about whales along the way, and learn about another animal that creates music and forms like sounds and long form structures.
Right.
It's fascinating stuff.
Well, maybe this would be a good time for us to listen to a little bit of that excerpt that you sent. Well, actually, it's a performance. You sent the performance is about 47 minutes, and we'll listen to a clip it's about 20 minutes in, and I'll is this available online or no?
Yeah, it's on songsessionscollective.com.
Okay. Then I'll
media.
So here, I'll go ahead and just play it. So on your website, you describe a desire to integrate activism, art, and science. Um, how do all those elements come together in a piece like this? Um, have you collaborated with scientists before? And what is sort of the activism part of the work that you're doing?
So I think like what we talked about with trying to get into other types of spaces, I think that creates some like an invitation for activism and an invitation for scientists to like to work with us, for us to like all like come together and communicate what needs to happen with the environment, which is we need to change something about how we're interacting with the environment so that we can preserve the earth longer in the end. I mean, that's meta level, like over here, overarching stuff that we're thinking about. We haven't worked with scientists before. Again, we're sort of at the beginning of this project, but how I would love to see that is that I gave a talk at the beginning of the show. Well, I would love to invite a scientist to give a talk, like sort of maybe a shorter like presentation or like paper reading of some sort, and a discussion, with the public about whale song or about climate change and how to get people to come together and make action happen, which is of course relevant right now as well, as people are doing that and standing up for themselves and for what they believe in, for what is right. And I think that goes the same with activism. Inviting environmental activists into a discussion, into a performance situation with us, where they, give some sort of presentation, or maybe we go and form a protest together. Maybe the piece becomes like we're playing and there's some sort of like protest happening at the same time, or getting people to feel something really intense about their connection with the environment to motivate them to do something. That is for me like woven into this project as well. I'm not sure. Would you agree with that, Eric, as well? I mean,
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think in some ways, the one of the ways that we can have impact as artists is by practicing our art. It's the tools, one of the tools that we have as individuals. So while I don't know if this is necessarily a direct um, ask of others to drop everything and do something. I do think the invitation to enter the space and have the conversation is certainly part of it, and the choice that we've made as artists to use our tools to kind of create that space and that opportunity to have that discussion is really apt. And I struggle so much thinking about how like what am I doing for the world, like how can I, like, sometimes clarinet just seems so insignificant, because it really is. But at the end of the day, we can engage with work that expresses these things, and I think it's all about creating the opportunity to have discussions like the one that we're having today, because without the discussions there is no progress. So yeah, I hope that we can continue to let the project grow and um, bring more people into the fold, and as Barry said, work with people to have them share their perspectives too, and create space for that as well, because yeah, we're certainly musicians who've worked hard to be musicians, but we're not biologists or climate scientists, so it's important to create space for that too. It can be a vehicle for change,
That makes a
certainly.
lot of sense. I mean, one of the last guests that we had on here too, Nell Shaw Cohen, if you guys know her, she's a composer, and her music deals a lot with nature. And we had a conversation too about like kind of a little bit what you alluded to, like what do artists do? Like, oh, it seems like, well, my clarinet, how is that going to help anything? But I think everybody has something to offer. It's kind of what we read. Like, art is a perspective into something that science doesn't have. I mean, we need, of course, we need science and we need scientists, no question. But and their role maybe is a little more obvious. But this piece that you guys did, it allows us to actually sit in the world of whale song and imagine that process playing out. And that's kind of that's an experience that I think only you guys are you're uniquely sort of equipped to offer. So I think, yeah, everybody just needs to do what they're doing.
Yeah, real.
I
Absolutely.
think I love all of these points as well, because I mean, for me, it's like whenever you go to you're going to see a show or something to have like an experience to like come away and reflect on, right? I mean, you're not just going to like just to go, you know, like you want to go and you want to come away and be like, oh my gosh, like wow, it was so cool to see Madonna live, or you know, like I don't know what
Yeah.
that would make you reflect on, but oh wow, it was so cool to go and see a flute and a clarinetist and some guy playing sine tones, but also know that they're trying to gauge this different perspective, this whale perspective in their music. They're trying to like get inside the mind of something that is non-human, understand it, and try to synthesize it in their own creative processes. And I think you're totally right, Eric. That's like activism in some way. That's just sharing that experience with people, and our excitement about it too. You know,
Yeah.
like we're all just excited about this.
Yeah.
At least I am. I think
Certainly.
you are. I know.
Barry's always excited.
I know. We can cut that part out. Sorry.
It's perfect.
It's good. People can tell when you're excited about something, and it's infectious.
Absolutely.
That passion always translates to people, and yeah.
Good. I hope so.
Yes. Sorry, were you gonna say something, Eric?
Oh no, I was just agreeing with you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we're all
So, before I let you go, I think my last question would be, what can we learn from whales as humans?
That's a beautiful question.
Yeah, it really is. I think what I've learned from whales is, I mean, in some ways, I could trace everything about how I think about time and like my perspective of trying to expand my sense of time, the way that I think about my own musical materials, like my own compositional process, just winnowing down to the essentials. Like, what do you need in a piece? What do you really need? How creative can you be with that tiny little bit, with 2 notes? How creative can you be with 2 notes? How far can you extend time with 2 notes, for instance? Like, this is like what I'm obsessed with now. And I don't think I would have gotten there had it not been for the whales. Like, they just had learning from them has had such a deep impact on me, and has, especially in like 2016 and like this first couple of years at Cornell, I was just obsessed with like trying to like learn from them and try to be more like them, I guess, and still am, I guess. So yeah, it's one of those. I mean, it's just like studying that influential composer to me, you know, that's like, oh my gosh, I love this music. I want to learn more about it. And then you do, and you're like, wow, I've kind of treated it. I've tried to treat that in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah, I think my experience is similar to yours. I haven't studied it nearly so deeply, but I think it's one of those, they're kind of one of those cosmic elements that exist on Earth, you know? They're like, their experience is just so far beyond anything that we can kind of wrap our minds around, that it's helpful it keeps things in perspective, you know? Keeps things in perspective. I'm worried about XYZ, and then I think about the lifespan of a whale and what that experience is, and how far they travel, and the elements they endure, and the families they create in their own ways, and you know, it just doesn't quite all seem quite so scary anymore.
Is there anything else you all want to say before I let you go that I haven't asked about?
Thank you for the time.
Yeah, thank you so much for your great questions, and for giving us this time to talk about the project.
Well, thank you.